We're live. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Kevin.
Did you forget my name there?
No, I was choking.
Oh, just kidding. That would happen to me. Hello, everyone. I'm excited. I don't know if I've ever done a live on a Monday at this hour, but I thought, why not? I worked in the salon today, and Jason and I were having a conversation, and it felt like a conversation that we wanted to share. And so, for those of you that don't know who I am, I'm Kevin, the healing medium, and I have the wonderful Jason joining me. And it's nice to see. We already have like 60 people here, so that's
Oh,
really
wow.
a pleasant surprise. We're going to. I'm going to put this up here because we're going to talk about past lives. Tonight, we have another workshop that we're doing that we're going to talk about if you're not aware of what we're kind of up to outside of YouTube within our collaboration. So we thought we would revisit that, share it with those that are not aware. And so question-wise, if you do have questions, sometimes I feel like I'm using StreamYard for the first time. Anyways, you can post questions along the conversation that are general past life related questions, and kind of, in that direction. We're not doing personal past life readings. So those are just something that can take just quite a bit of time. So in that, do feel free to post any general past life related questions as we go. And so, Jason, thank you for being here. It's always
Absolutely.
wonderful to be in conversation, live, and well, I guess it's live either way. But I mean live on YouTube or live just in the conversations that we have. They're pretty good. So we are, well, why don't you tell them, when are we doing our next past life regression hypnosis workshop?
Yeah. I know probably some of you have been to them, but in case if you haven't, this is basically the beginning this coming Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And it's a series of 3 different group hypnosises. One being this Thursday will be a past life regression focused one. And then over the next couple of weeks, we'll be doing the Meet Your Spirit guides, and then also ending with the future life progression. So it's really interesting. And then if you came last time or you missed 1 or 2 sessions, we're actually kind of shifting just a tad. So we're still going to do the regressions, but Kevin is going to be more active with the psychic mediumship. So he, I know that there were some people who came that had interesting future lives, and it was difficult for him to hold back. So it's kind of the direction I think we're going to go with, just uniting two. I say 2 worlds, but essentially it's all the same. So it's really easy. It's fun. So if you've never had hypnosis, it's a great way to just kind of get a taste of it. And I even hesitate to call hypnosis. I think calling it like a deep meditation, relaxation, where I'm guiding you and things like that is a little bit less stressful for some people to think about. So
Yeah, I love that. I'm so excited too, because I was, as you know or may not know, when like being prompted by spirit to give message and to speak when I can't, or when it's like, there are those moments where it almost becomes overwhelming. And so we had not talked about it, that I would contribute in that way. So doing the first, I think there was one little point where I had to say something. I don't remember specifically what it was. But there was just this overwhelm, if you would, in a great way. So I'm so excited for that part of it as well. And I know that's new to you as well.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see how that unfolds. And so, yeah, this is our second run of this series of 3 that we do. And for those of you that don't know, Jason is a quantum healing hypnosis therapist, and I say expert. And so in that, his ability to be in conversation with the higher self, different realms, different dimensions, different beings, your experiences with your clients, like your retention is spectacular. Like your replay, and it's interesting. And I don't know why I'm being prompted to correlate this, and maybe it doesn't at all. And I see we're getting lots of questions, so it's actually really because some of them I have the same kind of questions. But I want to say this about the people that have shared with me about their plant medicine journeys. And then the recall of that is like they remember like so much of the detail of it, where I literally listened for hours of someone's experience in that. And I find that when you're in that exchange, because you're not separate from the experience that the client in those past life regressions are having, and then your recall of it, just there's, I don't know if it's the just a coincidence that is. I'm curious what you think about that.
I mean, I can't speak for other practitioners. I know that there are other practitioners who have particular abilities. I would assume that those kind of play into their practices. One that it took a while for me to realize was that with clients, I can actually see what they're seeing and visualize and be there with them, which is, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because on the one hand, I can ask better questions and help them to really understand where they are and why they're there and why they're seeing it. Because with these regressions, the higher self, or the person's higher self, is in control of that, and it usually relates to this lifetime and what they need to know and the lessons that they can learn from that. So it helps me go deeper with clients, but at the same token, it's also, it can be emotional sometimes, and it's really difficult to step back from that, especially when someone is, suffering a horrible trauma or a horrible death. It's pretty intense, and especially when they're there in that moment, or being with someone who's starving or thirsty, dying of thirst or anything like that.
Right.
And I think that maybe in that, because I do kind of experience it with them, that I think it's the type of, I don't know, I have a really good memory too. So
Right. Yeah, you really do. So just to clarify about the actual workshop, yes, it is via Zoom, and it's a modified version of hypnosis. So it's a lighter stage of hypnosis. So it's not like the 5-hour session of the QHHT, like in-depth past life regression. So that was one of the questions there, just to clarify that.
That's actually a really important point.
Right.
This, if you're familiar with QHHT and Dolores Cannon, who developed the method, she used these techniques with groups of people in order to kind of help them to see that we all are hypnotized very easily many times throughout the day, and that a lot of times we conceive of hypnosis being a particular way, but watching television and not paying attention to what's going on outside, or listening to music and just completely losing yourself in it, and time goes by. I mean, we're hypnotized almost all the time in some way or another. So this technique is a lighter state of trance. So it is where you will be able to remember. I mean, it's I would say it's kind of almost as though you're daydreaming, kind of that, but going a little bit deeper in terms of what you're seeing and experiencing. But it's supposed to be fun. So it's not supposed to be it's not supposed to be serious, and it's just coming and being open and curious is all that really matters.
I love that. We've got a question here, pardon me, from Dream Detective Kate asking if perhaps they dream in a different era, could that be an indication of a past life? Good question.
That's that I like the name Dream Detective Kate.
Totally.
That is, I mean, it's really difficult to say. I would say that if you just happen to have like a fleeting dream of somewhere in some place or something, it could be. The key markers are that you really, it's vivid. One, two, that when you wake up, it's, you know, it's all still there and you're able to access it. Also, it's just the depth of detail and the people around you. So sometimes you might notice in dreams where there's, you know, people that are in your life right now, and you might be in a different time, a different era, and they might be there with you. That could also be a signal that you might have had past lives with them. So there's a lot of, it's difficult to say. I can't say yes or no. But the level of detail, if it's happening more than one time, if there's specific things that stand out to you that you're like, oh, this, you know, wow, that's kind of deep, or anything like that. I mean, it's, our dream state is the deepest level, in a sense, trance. But, you know, there are the times when our brains just need to, you know, get rid of a lot of things. But the dream state is the place for communication, and for people that are a little bit more not open to the spiritual world, you know, this is the realm that, you know, your guides or loved ones might come through in order to speak with you, because you're, you know, you're in that particular state.
And that's the thing, like, how do we, or how can we? Yes, there are people that have the ability to really, you know, when you're in that exchange, to identify someone's past life. Two questions. I forgot the first one, but are all of our past are all of our past lives stored in the Akashic records? Is one of them that I heard.
Yes.
I love it. I love it. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And there, I, you know, I'll touch on the fact that that we do have access to the Akashic records when or before we incarnate into a lifetime. And sometimes it's possible to choose a lifetime that isn't necessarily yours, or that your soul has experienced throughout the course of thousands of lifetimes, that might be beneficial for you in terms of what you plan on doing in this life and the lessons you learn. This is also known as imprinting, where you know, there might be 10 people who claim that they had a past life as Cleopatra, and this is often what skeptics of hypnosis and past life regression usually latch onto. But in reality, it is possible if, you know, you have 10 people that are going to be in a lifetime where they held a position of power, and that they need some type of framework in order to build that story that they're creating for themselves, that there could be 10 people that do have the same lifetime and they didn't actually live it, but it's every lifetime is stored in the Akashic records. So it's an energetic storehouse and records everything. It's like the supercomputer of supercomputers. So it's, and then, you know, I should also say, a lot of people are like, well, then why should I go to, you know, what's the point of past life regression?
That's a great question. Like,
yeah,
that actually is, a lot of the questions in here are that, like, really, what is the significance, and where can it maybe be really helpful? And then on the other end, where could it not be? You know, like,
pretty much everyone, we do live thousands of lifetimes, and that also means that you might have you've lived a lifetime that someone, you know, another soul, another spirit was browsing through the Akashic records and was like, oh wow, this could really help me in the life I'm planning. Because the important part is we do plan our lifetime here. Dolores, we're the screenwriter, director, actors, the sound men, everything else. We do that before we come here. And obviously, there are benefits to having the access for the Akashic records in terms of choosing lifetimes. And especially now when so many of us are incarnating here, with the transition of the earth and the raising of vibrations and frequencies, that many of us have honestly never had a lifetime here. Right. And so that the Akashic records are a resource, so that if you'd never been here before and have no concept of anything, it helps you kind of have a base and framework of ideas of culture and how we interact with each other. And so that's a resource in terms of that. I don't really think that there would be necessarily a downside. And to kind of go back to the question of what's the point of doing past life regression? Well, in a sense, you chose that as a tool to learn from in order to live out your life. So whether or not it's your actual lived life or not really doesn't matter, because there's still the value in that it can teach you something and that you selected it for a specific reason. Right.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, so it's kind of, when I first became aware of imprinting, it was kind of, I felt let down a little bit, but then in all actuality, it really doesn't matter. It's when we do regressions and things like that, the whole point is for you to learn about the current lifetime. And that's always what's most important.
Right. I love this next question. Cat96 says, do we have the same disposition, likes, dislikes, personality traits? Great.
Yeah. That's a great question. And it's true that our personalities never change. I mean, circumstances, environments, all that, cultures, timelines, whatever else, but our spirit, which is, you could liken to a personality, it never changes. So that's why, sometimes, you might have a loved one who passes away and they're sticking around, and you might have had a grandfather that was a big prankster, and then it seems like jokes are being played on you. It's because the personalities never go away. That's the one thing that's kind of absolute for sure.
This is a good one too. This just kind of plays off of this one, but what about DNA? Like, does that remain? Does that change?
The DNA changes. Yes. It is kind of like our own Akashic records, in that it does traumas and everything that we experienced in past lives. Of course, if we talk about imprinting, that gets really complicated, but but the thing about it that I've really learned is that, and from the higher self, is that we have the power to change our DNA, and it's a crystalline structure. So it is energetic and it responds, and it can, we can influence it if we believe that it is the case, in order to, make changes in our lives. And it's kind of I don't know, it's something that we're not really taught. And I even had a conversation today, interestingly, with a client who was talking about some new procedure called CRISPR or something, where they're experimenting with removing DNA, for example, from an unborn child and replacing it with something else if they're going to have like Tay-Sachs syndrome or anything else, which I don't know how the higher self would feel about that. Because essentially we do choose what we experience, and so that might be interfering with things that we might not want to. But the DNA can change, and it's really important in terms of people who have specific genetic diseases that might run through a family, and you might be told you're genetically predisposed to have whatever Lyme disease, not Lyme disease, but a disease because
Right.
your family has it. And that's so dangerous, because the higher self is always like, no, no. I mean, it's possible you do have a better chance of contracting or developing it, but when you grow up thinking, oh, eventually I'm going to have this disease, or it's manifesting it and it's creating it and making it become your reality. So that's always a red flag when people expect the worst and it happens, versus, yeah, my parents and my grandparents had it, but it's not for sure, and I don't want it.
Interesting. Great question. Norberto, thank you guys for these questions. Thank you for being here. I'm a little surprised that there's as many people as there are. So thank you, each of you, for being here. I love it. Hello, hope you guys are going well. My question is, are there signs of past lives being repeated in the present? Good question. I've thought this actually as well.
It's I always tend to bring this up, that that when it comes to past life, present life, future life, in all the greater scheme of things outside of our own limited perceptions as human beings, it's all happening all at once.
Mm-hmm.
It's really difficult to conceive of, and in fact, we're not supposed to be able to conceive of it, because that's part of our why we're here, why we're here, and we chose to be here. But in the greater scheme of things, there's no such thing as a past life or present life, or I'm sorry, future life. It's all happening right now. So the overlaps between different lifetimes can happen. And also in the sense that if there are patterns that are connected to a past life, it's typically because you didn't learn a particular lesson in that past life, and that's why you're back here. Again, that it's difficult to think, okay, everything's all at once. How did I not learn something in the past? But but it's patterns, and specifically things that always seem to happen to you, or and nothing's really supposed to be perceived as like a victim, because we choose what we experience. But the patterns in your life are usually a really good marker of lessons that you didn't learn before, and there's a reason why stuff keeps happening to you, because you need to learn something from it, even if it's really difficult to figure that out.
Yeah, I love it. Lots of great questions. Okay, where are we here? Yeah, that's the thing. Like, people say, I was reading this in some of the comments where people are like, I am so clear that I have this memory of, say, this portion, or they feel this really deep knowing of a connection that they feel with something particular, maybe a place, a person. And in that is an indication of a past life, without a doubt. It's, so I guess in that, do we have the ability to unveil, or to like, how do we do that for ourselves? You know what I'm asking?
I mean, there's some cases where we aren't. I mean, it's kind of like having the answer before we get here. It's kind of, our ultimate purpose here is to learn a specific lesson, and what that is. There's some kind of general things that are common, like learning the meaning of love, or learning the meaning of love through the worst circumstances. And you could have had the most terrible life, but you might have had a mother or a husband or somebody that's really, you had this genuine true love with. And so in that, with the patterns, I would trust intuition, and because our higher self like I've said before, isn't some type of magical, mystical thing. It's something that's always with us, whether you call it intuition or gut feelings. A lot of times that I've noticed as a practitioner, people have questions about things, and the deeper question is, well, if you have a question like, did I live this lifetime? That has to come from somewhere. So if you have this really strong feeling that you've been somewhere before or you've met someone before, it's our conscious ego blabbing in our ears that makes us question it. But in all actuality, in sessions with clients, they have these questions and their higher self is like, she knows this. It's like, she doesn't need to ask a question. She's asking the question because she doesn't want to take action or she doesn't want to accept it.
Right. It's not that they don't know the answer.
Right.
I love that. Dorothy Lynn, it's so great. When my granddaughter was a little girl, she was helping put on her coat. She said to me, I remember when I was your mom and I helped you put on your coat. It reminds me that I mean, I was a strange kid. There's no doubt about it. I was totally strange. And I would get up super, super early. I was under the age of 5 because I wasn't in school yet. My older brother, he was in school. And my mom came out and I was up on top, got on the counter, climbed on the fridge, was looking in the cupboards that were above the fridge. Well, she heard the noise and I was just curious. I just was wondering what was up in those cupboards. So she told me she woke up, she got out of bed, she came out and she said, what are you doing? Get down. You're going to hurt yourself. She was like concerned. And I'm getting down and it was right beside the stove. And she said, Kevin, she said, if the stove was on, you would have got burnt. You could have got burnt. And I said, she said something about, like you would hurt yourself. If you get burned, it's going to hurt. And I said, no, actually, I said, it doesn't hurt that bad. And she said to me, she said, well, hon, you haven't been burned yet. You haven't had a burn. So I said, well, actually, I have. And she said, well, Kevin, she's here. I mean, I was a little bit argumentative. Anyways, she says, you haven't been burned. I would know. And I said, actually, you wouldn't know. I said, I was burned. And I said, you weren't my mom yet. Well, she heard this and she was just like, anyway, she said, she tells the story. She phones my grandma and my grandmother, her mom was like, well, of course, she said, of course, like, what's the big deal? Meaning my grandma understood, but that's that part where it's like, we just sometimes know. And in the things that we say, the feelings that we have, I mean, it's a clear indication that we have had, hundreds or thousands of lives.
Yeah. And I think that's really important too, that, when we're children and we have these vivid imaginations and we do say things like that, or if you have children, they say things like that. It's, we have this conception that, for example, babies are completely oblivious to the world and they don't know what's going on. And I had a client who their higher self explained to me that when you're a baby, an infant in the world, and you take your first breath, which is when your spirit enters the baby's body, you have a full awareness of where you've been, who you've been, what you're doing there. It's all there. But as time kind of goes on, and then, for example, a parent who isn't exactly receptive to the fact that you were burned before they're your parent, we kind of shut that down. And in the particular account with the infant or the client that I had, it's babies cry because they can't communicate, and it's really frustrating because you have all this knowledge and all the knowledge of being before you came, or you came through the birth canal. There is this memory and this longing to really communicate and interact, but in all actuality, it's like it's dense here, it's heavy, it's I don't want to say miserable, but it's not. The earth is the hardest place to be, and so it's the babies. It's like all a matter of the spirit adjusting and getting used to being in the 3D world and gravity and not being able to communicate and having to use words to communicate. And they even, this actual client, her infant, she was worried because she slept so much, and her higher self said, well, this happens with all babies because they sleep so much because they're still going in and out and back into the spirit realm. So it's kind of I don't know. I think that's exciting that we come in that way, but yeah, I actually recently, I have to say this, had a client that she was very in touch with her spirituality, and she was a sensitive and had abilities, and her daughter was the same way. But she told me the story that when her daughter was maybe 2 or 3, her daughter did something that she wasn't supposed to do, and the client was kind of chastising her for what she did, and her 2 or 3-year-old turned around and said, you're my second choice as my mommy. There was someone else that I wanted, but I selected you.
Oh.
And
I think I told my parents that too.
And I mean, I was like, wow, that's a new level of guilt.
Yeah. Wow.
Like, using as a weapon. You weren't my first choice.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there you have it. Scott's bringing up thanks for being here, Scott, about birthmarks. I'm curious about, and I'd seen it, someone else, a couple of them had asked about the correlation between birthmarks and past lives.
Yeah, there is a big correlation between that, because our bodies sometimes, particularly in times of immense trauma in a past life, will carry that memory with it. And sometimes this manifests as birthmarks or mysterious skin conditions. I've had clients with skin conditions where it's rashes and everything else, and then it's, they had a past life as a witch and were burned at the stake, or not a witch, but accused of being a witch and burned at the stake. So that's definitely something where, I know Dolores had a client, I think, that they had a birthmark on either side of their neck, and then went to this past lifetime. It ended up that this person had died in that lifetime with a bullet shot, or a bullet that went through their neck, and they died. And so it had these 2 birthmarks on the side. So again, I can't say for sure, but from what I know, that they usually do point to some type of, mortal injury sometimes.
Yeah. I just had did you and I talk about birthmarks?
I think briefly.
I think we have I'm hearing like we have a similar birthmark in the same area.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Maybe we're fighting the same war, probably. Really great question here. Where are we with it's in the music, Diana? It's a great question.
Thanks for doing this. Joe speaking. Do we develop our future lives in a quantum state? Sort of subconsciously in the way of our current lives. Yeah, this is a great question too.
The question, just for people that are listening, that would be awesome.
Generally speaking, do we develop our future lives in a quantum state of being, sort of or subconsciously, in a way, while we are in our current lives? The answer is yes. Mm-hmm. Again, this goes back to the fact that everything's happening all at once. And even if we get into the idea of timelines where every choice you split off in different directions, depending on the choices. So you might decide to go left, but there's another aspect of yourself that goes right. So it's like we're always creating and interacting with different, different future possibilities and different past possibilities all the time. And it's kind of like it's been described to me by the higher self as like we should kind of envision time as like a sphere or a globe, and that we travel around the sphere, but the sphere doesn't have a specific size, that it's infinite, and that we even travel within the sphere. So it's almost like a network. If you think of those electric lamps that you touch and they kind of follow your fingers around. Yeah. That's how they described it, that, there really isn't a forward backward because it's the sphere. And so we're always, every decision we make impacts the future. Our future quote unquote selves impact us now. So it's not linear, definitely.
Wow, that's layered. That's a that's a novel.
It's like
That's a
getting
series.
into the quantum
Mhm.
science aspect of it. So, I mean, there is that concept of in quantum theory with, I think it's superpositioning, where one particle can be affected by another particle on the other end of the universe. The same concept
Right.
applies to us, that,
Yeah,
perceptually they're
Right.
far away, but at the same time, they're not.
Yeah.
So.
So yeah, if people are curious about our workshop that we're doing, like we said, a modified version of the QHHT session, obviously, because it is virtual, and just the safety kind of ethical parameters of that. So, but it was a great experience. I loved the sharing. So we do have room available. The link is in the description box, which leads you right to the registration for it. It's happening this Thursday. Is it this Thursday? Yeah, this Thursday at 5 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time, about a 2-hour container with Jason and myself. We're going to add that new layer of me tuning in, kind of seeing what that looks like. And that's so interesting because I just looked at the number and there's 111 of you here, which thank you so much for being here. These questions are amazing. Are you okay to keep going for a few more?
Absolutely.
Love it, because there's some great questions.
Yeah.
And Bridget was sharing that she took part. And so go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
In the past life workshop I did with you guys, I was always wealthy, or at least very comfortable, and I've always felt I would be wealthy in this life, but have struggled. Is there any correlation?
And I think this, in a different way, a lot of people were kind of asking the same question. So I know this will be the answer for.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to approach this question. I mean, one would be, we do have to experience all different aspects of life, even before we have had lifetimes, believe it or not, as rocks, as trees, and in that, our lessons, rocks, teach patience and stillness, trees, stability and strength. So everything is a learning experience, and we do have to run the full gamut of different situations. And it's, again, this all goes back to what you decide that you need to learn. And so it could be very well that you've had a lot of lifetimes as a wealthy person, as royalty, who knows what else, and then you decide, well, I kind of need to learn what's on the other side. And so that might have been your lesson to learn. And it's also sometimes karma is kind of going away. Well, it is essentially going away for us. But there might be reasons in terms of, maybe you're a wealthy person, but you took advantage of the poor. So therefore you're going to be, not saying you're poor in this life, but, there's a lot of different, like I said, aspects and approaches to this, because it's really comes down to what you decided you needed to learn, or what you need to work out karmically.
Wow.
And I also say that we can plan to have the very easy lives. I mean, there's no written rule that we have to go through a lot of trauma or challenges in a lifetime, but the whole reason why we come here is to learn. And so it is possible to take it's possible to take any route we want, but the Earth school is the most difficult. And just having the opportunity to come here, Dolores has talked about it, and I've even had conversations with higher selves about it, that there's an infinite number of souls and spirits that are waiting to incarnate here. So every lifetime we have is really a rare gift. So it's often the case that you just want to make the most of your time here, even if
Spirit just said, in essence, we're actually manifesting our next incarnation.
Yeah, it's already, everything's always in play. I mean,
Mm,
it's, if everything's all at once, then we've already lived this lifetime. We've already planned our next.
right?
If we're staying, maybe not. So it's, yeah, it's always in process.
Yeah, I love that. Um, Sharp Lisa is asking, I've become more confused about past lives since working on my family tree and doing DNA testing. Not sure how to ask this, but do we experience past lives from our family lines, from our own family lines? Feels like a yeah to me.
I don't know. That's
Hmm,
a good question, because it's always something I've wondered about, because
interesting.
we choose our life and we choose to incarnate in a body. So I always have wondered about that question about genetics and DNA and family heritage, because before I started doing this, I did a DNA family tree thing, but now it's kind of like, well, how do I know that? I don't know. It's kind of like
What were
one
you
of
going to say?
the,
How do I know that that's your family or that's my family?
yeah, it's like, well, I don't, yeah, it just gets so confusing to me. I wouldn't imagine, for example, that, well, I don't know. I mean, you could be a great great grandfather that came back. I mean, I don't see why not. I don't know. Karmically speaking, or no, what am I trying to say? Um, it might complicate things a little bit from the higher self perspective. It's kind of like why we typically aren't made aware of, for example, there's cases where you might have, you have a wife in this lifetime and you actually were a murderer in the past and you killed her, and then your karmic balance is, okay, I'm going to be in love with this person and live my life with her. So it's all a matter of the circumstances that we'll learn most from.
Mm,
So I'm not saying that for sure if a great 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 grandfather could incarnate as your child, possibly. Anything's possible.
mhm.
So
Which, speaking of killers, oh, you must be seeing these questions. Do serial killers repeat killing in other lives?
yeah, that's that again is a
I'm
complicated
just going to say that
question.
YouTube, this is for entertainment purposes only.
Yes.
Just wanted to mention.
um
Always.
yeah, that's difficult because
Mm. It's a great question because it's like
yeah,
with the warm and fuzzy stuff, but then on the
yeah,
flip side,
I mean, it gets into slippery territory, particularly when you're talking about what we consider to be morally and ethically repulsive. um that's not to say that serial killers and everything else are justified in their decisions, but the best way to put it is, we have the power. There's no limitations in terms of our choices. That's the one thing that we have here is free will. We do have a general plan in place, but we can make decisions, and sometimes there are those people that incarnate, or spirits that incarnate, that might not have really learned from. There is a school in the great beyond where we go to learn and learn lessons and everything else. And sometimes it is the case that a serial killer has a horrible life and either comes back and lives out the karmic debts that he or she's made, or they go back to the school and they don't come back for a while. So it's not really a matter of that people sit up in the spirit world and say, hey, I think I'm going to have a life of a serial killer. That doesn't
mm,
really happen.
mhm,
It's just like people who, we might set out to learn a particular lesson and we get far off track, and it's kind of like we have the choice whether we're going to learn in this life. And if we don't do it and we don't do the work and we don't tap into ourselves and our higher selves and our guides and we really pay attention, we're going to have to come back and do it again. So it's all a matter of, learning, really. Yeah.
Interesting. I love it. Spirit Watcher Suzanne is asking when we don't recall a portion of our drive, is that a form of hypnosis?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reality is, and we have this preconceived idea of hypnosis. I mean, I did up until I had my first client that, I wasn't even sure. I mean, I never expected to do hypnosis. It just, I kind of, I guess, was pulled into it, but willfully. But my conception was always about the magicians or stage performers hypnotizing people and embarrassing them or making them cluck like chickens and all that. And we think that that's hypnosis. I know you said you were a gorilla or something.
Yeah. I went literally into the middle of the auditorium, stood on the chair, pounded my chest like a gorilla.
Wow.
That is not something that I would do, but I did it.
Yeah, but we have this. We've been conditioned and based off of media, movies, everything else, what we kind of think of hypnosis as, but it's a matter of terminology. You could even say, if you do meditation, that's a form of hypnosis. Driving, you run a red light accidentally and you're not paying attention because your mind is somewhere else, that's a form of hypnosis. Or, I mean, classically watching television, it's like your focus and intention is in a specific point in the totality of your environment. So ambulance might run by and you don't hear it. Someone might knock at the door and not hear it because you're so focused on what you're watching, which also goes into why advertising for most people really works. There's a reason why commercials are on TV, because you're in a hypnotic state and highly suggestive. So, you might live your days not wanting a hamburger, but then you're watching a show and you see it and then it's like, oh, maybe I'll try one. So it's kind of, it's a very vulnerable state in some ways. So we're hypnotized all the time.
Yeah. Dreams and the possibility of dreams being a play out, if you will, of past, present, and future lives. What are your thoughts around dreams?
I mean, the dreams are the most powerful way to communicate with us. And particularly, like I said earlier, if you have difficulty, even if you want in your daily life to, for example, communicate with guides or communicate with loved ones or communicate with your higher self, and you doubt yourself or you kind of give up or anything like that, the dream world is the place where we can do that work just by setting intention. And that also caters to asking questions. I mean, you can ask specific questions before you go to sleep at night and say, I really want to know. And it has to do, I should say it has to do with this lifetime. So this also goes into why you do hypnosis and want to go into a past life regression. Needs to always be, and this is what the higher self always stresses, that this lifetime is the most important. And getting lost in or exploring past lives can be fun, but in essence, everything that we see and witness in past lives or even our dreams usually and directly relates to questions we might have now, challenges we have now, things that we don't see or don't want to see in this life come to light in our dreams. So the dreams are a powerful place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the question is, are we dreaming now?
I knew you were going to ask that. What about pets?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a great question. I've had some clients who had these really strong connections with their pets, which I love dogs, so I can completely understand that. And I had a client, and she was like, I have this litter of puppy, and these were older dogs that at the time, but she had got them all as a litter. But there was one specific dog was always by her side and always with her, and was getting older. And she had the intuition, I really feel like there's a bond between us that stretches between a pet owner and a dog. So I did ask her higher self in her session, and the higher self said, yeah, they've had many lifetimes together. He was, not necessarily in dog form in every life. And there are, for example, I've in many different forms, ways that spirit or souls choose to become protectors for particular people, kind of like protector spirits or whatever else. And it's usually with people who are have had traumatic lives in the past for specific abilities, suffered traumatic deaths. And so a spirit may commit itself and say, I'm going to be your protector. In this case, with the dog, he was a protector spirit for her, and they did have that connection and that bond. And so it's not unheard of for dogs to have past lives, and sometimes it's human form, and sometimes not. So it's anything is possible.
I love that. You might have answered this already, but I might have blacked out. Just kidding. I was dreaming. Just kidding. I'm curious. I thought that was funny. I lost my train of thought because I was trying to be a smartass. And about, oh yeah, this life is the most important life. This very life that we are living in this moment, if you will, is the most important. But how can like a past life regression or doing work around past lives enhance or help us in this life?
I mean, the quick answer is they're extremely important. I mean, it's also has to do with intention and why you're doing it, which I kind of touched on. That you can have instances where, and I know that, which I've learned kind of through doing this, that there are regressionists out there who do hypnosis and take people on kind of like field trips to different lives, but there's no real purpose or intention set. So really going into it without knowing what you want to know or the purpose. For example, there are people who you might connect really well with, some type of Eastern culture, and you think you have a past life in Eastern culture, but you're living in, the US or Canada or wherever. And you're so drawn to that and become so obsessed with that you kind of stop living in this life. And in those cases, you're kind of in dangerous territory, because from my experience with the higher self, and I don't think it's just me, that this life, like you said, is the most important at all times. So, and it can be dangerous. I mean, I've had clients who have gone to regressionists before, that there really isn't an intention set, like I want to know this or I want to know that, or how do I move forward in my career, and that they go back to these lives and really have no idea really what they're seeing. Oh, this is nice. I'm, in Japan. But then when they come back, it's kind of this empty okay, well, that was
Mhm.
fun. So I, the importance lies in how we set the intention and the fact that we can get information from our past lifetimes in order to help us on our path now. And so it's important to see them past lives or even future life progression as tools to making the best choices that we can here and now.
Yeah. Yeah, Lise, I love that. Regression is like saying peeling an onion layer by layer. Yeah, so if you do feel called to join us in the upcoming workshop, it is this Thursday, 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time. It's going to be a lot of fun, and that's the thing. So if you're just curious about it, it's a really safe place to just be in that exploration. And I will say I was really pleasantly surprised, if you will, around the sharing of the experiences that people had in it. It was really great. And I always look forward to that part of it because you never really know when you're observing, whether you're facilitating or not, like what's the experience. And so the sharing part of it is always, we give a lot of room for that to really just hold the space of being able to share kind of parts of what your experience was. So, yeah.
And I also, I really want to stress, I mean, these sessions are a safe place that when you come, it's coming with an open heart, an open mind, and reserving judgment, and leaving that kind of at the virtual door. That, you know, this is a place for us to connect, and the energy that's created in these sessions or any type of group hypnosis, whether it's in person or online, is amazing. And it creates, I mean, the work that we do in terms of trying to get in touch with our spiritual heritage, I guess you could put it, has ripple effects, that the energy, the curiosity, everything has a positive thing that spreads outside of the whole experience. So and again, this is it's supposed to be fun. And with that, I'll also say, we talk about the sharing, but it is perfectly okay not to. I know that just from these sessions that we've done, people have had really powerful, meaningful experiences that they didn't want to share or weren't ready to share. So don't think that you have to, you know, bare your soul to the world or to us. It's completely your choice what you do with it.
Yeah, camera off, microphone off. No sharing. It looks different for everybody, and that's perfect. Melissa, or Pamela, pardon me. I love this lady. Pamela, I love you. I've noticed in the last few years, I've had less and less of those deja vu experiences. Is there anything to that?
Yeah, deja vu is kind of tricky to talk about just because, it all goes down to the way that we perceive time and timelines. So it is possible that we do kind of take a wraparound and come back based on some choices. It's also very, we shift into different realities all the time. That may be very, very like a timeline. So we make a particular decision. We might jump back on the timeline we were before, and things might be a little bit different. There might be a tree somewhere you haven't seen before or never noticed before, and it could be very well the case that it wasn't. But with deja vu, I wouldn't gauge kind of your progression in learning and having those experiences as any type of marker of if you're how quote unquote well you're doing. Because I mean, my nudge or intuition is that if you're not having a lot of deja vu experiences, you're kind of on track, if that makes sense.
Right. There you go. I love that. I love it. And that's sometimes just the learning of the perspective. So in that, you get the check mark, Pamela. You get the check mark. Yeah. I love it. Jason, thank you. And thank you all for being here on a Monday evening. I know it's late for some of you. Oh my goodness. Thanks for joining and staying. And it's always wonderful being in conversation with you, Jason, and all of the questions. My goodness, I love this. I think we need to do more of this. I don't know. I'll send you an email and see. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know where I come up with some of this stuff. But anyways, love to you all. Thank you all for being here. And we will see some of you in the workshop. We are doing the continuation of the other 2 workshops, which is, actually, I'll just say that now. The Spirit Guide, Meet Your Spirit Guide, Reconnect with Your Spirit Guides workshop will be on Sunday, the 6th of November. That one's going to be a Sunday from 10 a.m. till 12 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And then the Future Life Progression will be again on a Thursday, the 10th of November at 5 o'clock. And I'll put all of that information in the description box if you'd like to join us. And there's no, if people feel called to join us for a second time or whatever that looks like, the invitation is there. It will look very different in each experience. So,
I mean, I'd especially encourage people who came to one of the previous ones to come, because I think we're just on the brink of kind of figuring out our pairing a little bit. And I think this is the direction that we're supposed to be going. So it will be a different experience. And even though you did a past life regression, you might have we're going to be setting intentions and asking questions. So you might have a different question than last time, or you should at least, that might take you into a different space or a different experience. And I'll also say that if you can't make a session, if you haven't come to any of these, there's no particular order. So if you can't come to this one on Thursday, it's not like you need to catch up or anything like that. They're all individualized, so that it's a session into in itself, essentially.
Awesome. Thanks for saying that. All right. Have a good night, everyone. We'll see you again soon. Bye for now.